Too late.
Oh gosh, here we go. Come on. Hey, Happy New Year. Where's your cat? That should be a feature of the show. Here we go.
I saw that. And good morning and Happy New Year to everybody watching us this morning on it's January 4th. Forgive me for the mistake. And welcome to the Japanese Politics One-on-One with the CEO of Langley Esquire, Timothy Langley, and me as a host, Maya Matsuoka. We are very happy to have you with us again. And I know that some of you are watching from other parts of the world, for example, from Pennsylvania. Thank you very much, Rick, for making it a tradition. And yes, for once again being with us and being curious about what is going on in Japanese politics, because even though this week has been a festive week here in Japan, there are still undercurrents and also events happening here. So Timothy, thank you so very much for being with us even on this Sunday morning. This is episode 256 and we are very steadily moving towards the 5th anniversary of this show. So it's over to you. Sorry for this abrupt transition.
No, even on this Sunday, you say every Sunday we have met over the last, almost 5 years. We are 4 episodes away from a 5-year anniversary, Maya. Good morning, Japan Hands. Thank you very much for joining us. For those of you that are new, we have a synopsis. The last synopsis that we sent out, Maya, got great readership. We sent it out, I think, on Thursday or
Yes,
Wednesday. Wednesday was Christmas, New Year's. No, New Year's was Thursday.
It was this week, past weeks.
We loaded up on Substack, and Substack tells us how many people have actually opened it and read it, and the readership is just going through the roof. So thank you very much for that, and thanks for pumping that out, Maya. So good morning, everybody. I am not on the good ship Grimm's. I spent almost 5 days on the water, and I came back last night so that, number one, I could prepare for the first week of the year and also prepare for this briefing and get my makeup ready. But it's pretty cold even inside the cabin of the good ship. So I thought I would do my briefing from my home office today. And as Maya said, there has been a lot going on, even though it is the end of the year. Essentially, I mean, all of us know this, the entire country shuts down for Oshogatsu. It doesn't shut down for Christmas, but the way Christmas fell this year, and then we rolled into the weekend, basically the rest of the week was just shot. Even the ministries closed down. Everybody showed up for work from time to time hungover, but that's that time of the year. And so for the last maybe 8 days, the country has been totally shut down, and we come back to work tomorrow on Monday. The diet opens on the 23rd, which is a Friday. That's 19 days away. So it's not that since the extraordinary session closed and nothing has happened, a lot has happened. And if you've been following, you understand that rather than the LDP having a bilateral relationship with Ishin and making promises to Ishin, yes, we'll make sure that the diet seats are cut. And yes, we'll make sure that Osaka is the second capital. We'll do that. So just join us. And they weren't successful in achieving that. So that's first on the agenda when the diet opens up. But more importantly is it's a triangular relationship now because Tamaki's Democratic Party for the People swooped in after the diet ended, and the prime minister and him agreed with lots of fanfare and smiling faces for the cameras to raise the tax-free ceiling of salaries up several notches to include a wider margin of Japanese voters. So that's a very big deal. So when we come back into the diet on the 23rd, and it's important to note, it's the 23rd and it's a Friday, they close up and then they get back to work on a Monday. This tells us a couple of things, but let me get into that a little bit later. And the prime minister was mostly in town over the weekend. We've got the yen exchange rate that I want to get into. There's been geopolitical moves. going on with Taiwan and saber rattling by China. This move by President Trump in Venezuela will have ripple effects throughout the world, but also it impacts what China is calculating it may do with regard to moving on Taiwan. So this is a big signal for China. And also, it's just incidentally, the South Korean president is visiting China today on a state visit. So there's a lot going on geopolitically, even though for Japan, we're closed down until tomorrow, but we will actually not really roar into action on the first week, because typically the first week is a little bit slow in Japan. People are exchanging New Year's greetings, and they're visiting people and saying hello and thank you very much for last year. And I look forward to working with you this year. And then it really starts keying up towards the end of the week and more robustly next week. Next week, I've got to point out, this weekend is a 3-day weekend with Coming of Age Day being next Monday. So it's somewhat strange to come off of New Year's and a holiday there and then jump into a 3-day weekend. But that's just the way the calendar works. And then we've got the current emperor's birthday in February, on February 23rd. So those are just weekends, but it's all a dynamic that kind of makes sense when you're following this. You're following the diet, you're following the yen, you're following geopolitics. It all does seem to make a bit of sense, and I hope to explain that in a little bit better detail so that when we get into the Q&A, it's a richer dialogue, and you generate, and we all generate, a little bit more insight into what's going on in Japan. So I'll turn it back to you, Maya, and then I'll get into the various points that I want to talk about. And then let's get into a really robust Q&A session. Thank you.
Thank you, and to everybody who has just joined us, thank you very much for joining. Happy New Year once again, and we very much hope that it will be a good year for you. Also, please let us know that you have been with us by hitting like or follow or subscribe, depending on the platform you have been on or you're watching us on, because we are streaming on Facebook as well, LinkedIn and YouTube. We also have the audio only Clubhouse there, and if you let us know that you have been here, we'll be very, very grateful. Please help us spread the word again, because these briefings are entirely free of charge. We do not ask for any money, even though sometimes Timothy jokes about this. But yes, thank you very much for being with us and supporting this. We really appreciate your help and persistence in followership. So again, here we go with Timothy. So Timothy, just give me a second. Here we go. Yes. All right. So it looks like the connection is not very stable today, but if something happens, please bear with us, because we'll try to resolve the connectivity issue immediately. So Timothy, it's once again over to you, and let's move into the details before we go to the questions and answers.
Great. Thank you very much, Maya. And you're not with your cat today?
No, because he's so just persistent in being on camera, and knocking things off the desk and everything. So I just sent him to the other room. Sorry for this.
That's too bad. Okay. All right. Well, we'll try and get through this briefing anyway. Once again, good morning, everybody, and Happy New Year. Maya, thank you very much for pushing us through this in 4 episodes, 5 years together, 5 years every Sunday. That's why I'm broadcasting from inside or on the deck of the good ship Grimps, because that's where I spend my time. That's where I spend my free time. And so I apologize for always bringing that up, but it's kind of inescapable. Today, I'm reporting from my home office. It's beautiful outside. If you looked at the moon last night and over the next couple of days, you will be astounded at how big and round and bright it is. And it's bright for a couple of reasons. The Earth is closest to the sun right now, and at the same time, the moon is closest to the Earth. It's the first time. It won't happen like this for another 45 years. So the full moon is brighter because it's closer. Both of us are closer to the sun. But this is a real interesting phenomena. The weather has been incredibly great these last couple of days. It's rained, it's snowed a little bit, But for the middle of winter, this is not bad, and it's, I think, a suggestion of what we have to come. The diet will open on the 23rd of January. This tells us that there won't be a snap election. So earlier we were speculating that if the prime minister opens the diet maybe on the 7th, which is probably the first day the diet could open, which would be a Wednesday. That would be tomorrow's the 5th, 6th, and the 7th. That would be the first time that they could open the diet, and that would be a signal that the LDP is lining up to have a snap election. And when they announced just maybe 8 days ago or 10 days ago that the diet will open up on the 23rd, everybody took a breath of relief, because we know now that the prime minister feels confident enough and the LDP secure enough that it's not going to challenge the current mix of diet seats. It's not going to try and grab power while the Takaichi administration is riding high. As reported last week, there's been no recent polls, but last week's poll results told us that the prime minister is riding high around 70% approval rating. This is astounding. She's been in office for a month and a week, and her approval rating is high. It usually is high for new leaders in the honeymoon period, but for this prime minister, it's pretty astounding. And she's been able to coalesce not just the LDP to calm down, but also to move the ball forward. She settled differences with Ishin and made a somewhat coalition with them. It's not a formal coalition. A formal coalition, of course, would include them getting a cabinet seat, so they would be a minister of one of the 21 ministries, formal ministries, and that gives them greater throw weight. It gives them great ability. It means they also need to swallow a little bit more of what the LDP is trying to shovel, but they didn't do that. Ishin didn't do that. What they did instead is they said, we will join you to pass this extraordinary budget, the supplemental budget during the extraordinary period, and we will move forward into 2026 to try and make it so that you can achieve the policy objectives, but we'll do that with the cost that you need to do a couple of things for us. There were about 10 things that Ishin and the LDP agreed upon, and the most significant one was the reduction of diet seats. The reduction of the diet seats, yes, it helps everybody. It helps the LDP. It helps if you're in power, but it hurts as well. So it's a bit of a gamble. The decision was to reduce the lower house seats by 10%, and we went through a long rigmarole of, would it come from the proportional representation or from the direct representation? How would that go? Would it be 50 seats? Would it be 25 seats? How many from each slice, the proportional or the direct voting representatives? And they eventually came down to, let's split it between both of those constituencies, and we need to reduce the number. It's not going to be 50 seats, which is exactly 10%, but let's make it 45, and let's distribute it a little bit more heavily towards the representative seats. They weren't able to pass that through the diet because there was another bill pending that needed to go through first, and that was on political reform, the way that the politicians get money to run their campaigns and the way that they generate money. The LDP is the big tent. It's the big business political party. So it gets donations from the big companies, and that's how it funds itself. It has these briefings and these hagemaskai and benkyokai, and everybody else wants them to tap that down because nobody else benefits like the LDP does in that segment. That bill was before the reduction of House seats bill, and that one stalled. So it kind of jammed up, and they ran out of time. But they did pass the extraordinary supplemental budget, the largest in maybe 20, 25 years, this supplemental budget, that the effects of which you will be feeling already, but more significantly going into January, February, and March. So at the close of this session, actually at the close of the year, the Democratic Party for the People kind of came in and they were able to coalesce with the LDP to get the salary, the tax-free salary ceiling raised. And this is a great victory for Mr. Tamaki. So whereas before the LDP and Ishin were forming this kind of loose alliance and we'll be friends as long as you do those things that I want you to do, and then I'll do the things that you want me to do. So Ishin wasn't quite successful. It wasn't successful in naming Osaka as the second capital, just in case. And it wasn't successful in reducing the number of Diet seats. And it's for a lot of reasons. So they were mad. They wagged their finger at the prime minister, but some of it is not quite her fault. There was a timing issue. So they kicked the ball down the road and they said, we'll address it next year. And in fact, once the Diet opens formally on the 23rd, one of the first items on the agenda is making Osaka the formal second capital of Japan. So there will be a lot of discussion about that. So the LDP is trying to fulfill on its promises, but in the meantime, Mr. Tamaki's Democratic Party for the People has swooped in. So now we have a trilateral relationship. And not only that, but Komeito is kind of floating around saying, you know, I don't know if maybe we were a little bit hasty when we left the alliance. So there's that dynamic going on too. So the difference between Japanese politics this time during the Ishiba administration just a year ago and the Takaichi administration right now is dramatically different. The prime minister moves into the new year with an alliance that's anchored on Ishin and the Democratic Party for the People. And if that holds, then that means that this alliance holds the majority in the lower house and in the upper house, so they'll be able to move more smoothly. It might cost a little bit off the nose of the LDP to keep this together, but that's the kind of story that we can look forward to moving into 2026. So it's a coalition dynamic that will be, it's new, it might be robust. I think Ishin is a little bit jealous, and Democratic Party for the People, Mr. Tamaki, is riding high. So with Komeito, I think they're worried that if there's an election, and there's not likely to be an election now, with this triangular alliance, and the Diet must pass the budget for the year by the end of March. On April 1st, that budget needs to be passed. So until then, there's probably going to be a little bit of skirmishing, but no battles. They'll wait for the Diet to pass the budget, and then from April, May, and June, then you can anticipate, you know, a little bit of filtering out, a little bit of a score settling. So those score settlings, we will understand that a little bit better as we move into January and February. But it's interesting what's going on, the dynamic in Japanese politics at this point in time. We appreciate that you tune in here to kind of get a tune in on what's going on. It'll be a more, it's not going to be more significantly meaningful in the briefing next week, but give it 2 weeks, the Diet to open, then there'll be a lot of political happenings. Otherwise, there's a lot of other things going on geopolitically, trade-wise, and with the yen and that sort of thing. So let me get a little bit into that. The prime minister was called by Donald Trump on Friday. They spent 25 minutes together. This was a call that was initiated by the president. And I think it has a lot to do with what his plans were with Venezuela, which you've all heard about. But it also kind of signals this relationship building between Japan and the United States. There've been some mixed signals as you've been following. The United States wants to open trade routes with China, but it also wants Japan to take a stronger stance. It does support Ms. Takaichi's pronouncement that if there is a kinetic action in Taiwan, it is an existential threat for Japan. That is the comment that she made that made China so angry. And this rhetoric, this continuing rhetoric, the ceasing of planes coming into Japan for tourism. I don't know what the proportion is, but I read that 41 flights were canceled. And so that means those 41 flights from China to Japan bringing tourists were completely canceled. There are much more than 41 flights that come to Japan from China. So I'm not sure what the proportion is, but it's got to hurt. Japan relies a lot on tourism trade, and the Chinese component of that, it used to be almost 50%. It's probably around 30, 35 or 40%. You might have better numbers on that, Maya, but it is dwindling now. And that's a lot of, it's not quite free money, but it's almost free money for any country if they have a robust tourism economy. And Japan does. It's one of the pillars that supports, the finances and the yen and that sort of thing going on here. So it's pretty important. Donald Trump and Prime Minister Takaichi talked about a couple of things: the security alliance, what's going on in Taiwan, this massive military and naval exercise that China had around Taiwan over the last week. I think China, a lot of people are worried about that. I think it's saber rattling. It's China trying to establish a new norm. This is what we're going to do. This is what we always do. This is how we do things. And it's not quite the fact, but they're testing the resilience and they're testing the reaction time of the United States and Japan. And also, from time to time, South Korea gets involved. And that's why this state visit of the president of South Korea to China today and tomorrow is so important. This is the second time these two individuals have met personally in the last 6 weeks. This is the second visit. This is a state visit too, by the way. So China doesn't want South Korea to kind of drift too far away. It wants to make sure that it is an important trade partner. And if things happen, we're buddies, so stay cool. And what goes on in Japan, and we both hate Japan, don't we? So let's just stay buddies, and our trade flows and our exchange of tourism it's really going strong. So let's stay like that. Taiwan has been visited, so it's the new year. A lot of Diet politicians, the parliamentarians from the Diet, are not required to be in Tokyo, and many of them, to polish their diplomatic and their foreign policy chops, travel when they have that time. As soon as the Diet ends, they're not required to be in Tokyo to attend committee meetings or to vote on certain issues. They take off. Most of them will go back to their constituencies to kiss babies and shake hands and to join in various matsuri. And that was happening a lot these last maybe 6 or 7 days. But the ones who are really kind of enhancing their power, they're trying to polish, themselves as being competent and renowned in foreign policy circles, are traveling overseas. And there was a large contingent that went to Taiwan. We talked about this last week. Kono Taro was there. Mr. Hagiura was there. There's a mission of Japanese businessmen, a very considerably powerful contingent of Japanese businessmen that travel to Japan in January every year. About 31 of them go, so that means the delegation is larger than that. They've canceled that. So this rhetoric, this tension between China and Japan, it has not diminished. It has actually increased, so much so that the United States, and in fact even the EU, have messaged to China, can you calm it down a little bit? Can you tone down the rhetoric? It is not helpful. It is not generating the results that you want. It is actually increasing the tensions. I don't know if China is going to pay that much attention to it. They've got their own, their own strategy in play, and people are watching it very carefully. What happened in Venezuela is very important in this context as well, because if the United States is going to move on Venezuela in a way that it did and take over the president of that country, it's a double-edged sword. Maybe it tells China, well, if you do that to Venezuela because Venezuela is in your sphere of influence, why can't we do the same thing to Taiwan? And in fact, our argument on Taiwan is stronger than your argument on Venezuela. You talk about drug trade and terrorism and the president being a cartel leader. Our argument is far stronger than that. So you're getting away with attacking Venezuela? What's fair is fair. So it also says that the United States, Donald Trump is not afraid to kind of put his money where his mouth is. He says if you're going to do that, you're going to suffer repercussions. And in many instances, politicians talk out of both sides of their mouth. This indicates that you need to think twice if you're going to be challenging the United States in that context. So I think the real concern here is that we're reaching an inflection point that if we pass that inflection point, then the likelihood of China moving kinetically on Taiwan will diminish, but we're not there yet. And this new normal that the PLA naval forces and the air forces and the bombers and their joint exercises with Russian bombers continues to kind of set a new standard, a new normalcy. Really, it puts you on your toes, and it makes you think, it could happen at any time. And I think that is the dangerous part. So this show of force really puts a lot of emphasis on, number one, the United States to continue to look at this, but also for Japan to be prepared for it. So this supplemental budget that was passed just 2 weeks ago, a huge component of it went to defense spending. And the islands that surround Japan, that belong to Japan, that are facing Taiwan, are being bolstered incredibly with drones, with missiles. Japan is bolstering its defense industrial complex. So that means that it's building weapons for its own consumption, but also hopefully for export too. So they're embedding technology, AI, doing all of the things that they did with the automobile industry in the hopes of building a new industry that has an appeal globally, not just for their own purposes. So they're purchasing a lot of U.S. technology, Israeli technology as well. They're getting world-class technology in defense equipment. Some of that is because it is offensive in nature, and Japan is restricted from producing offensive weapons. The Article 9 of the Constitution forbids Japan from doing that, from even having an army. The Japanese Constitution tells Japan there will be no more war. Japan will not be an aggressor nation. You can have defense capabilities. You can have a self-defense force, but not an army. And you can have weapons, but they have to be defensive in nature. That whole paradigm is shifting. It's changing incredibly. And I think it's just a matter of time before, the issue is already there, but revision of the Constitution, the Japanese Constitution, unique among all nations in the world today, has been untouched since its creation, and it's been in force 60 years. So whether you agree with Article 9 or not, the Constitution could undergo a bit of a revision. It was created for the Japanese, who were defeated in war and turned over to the Japanese, and the economy and the business and the politics have largely been run on that fabric. But it is, you could argue that it's about time for the Japanese to take over and to refine it to address, the current situation, the current, context of Japan. Japan is not like it was, 60 years ago. And in fact, you can say that Japan is very much not like it was even 20 years ago. The bubble economy was about 30 years ago, 25 years ago. But we've gone through an awful lot, and we're not finished yet. Japan is still going through this transition. And if you follow the yen is now at, let me see, it closed at 156.8 on Friday when the markets closed, maybe a week ago. And this means that the weakening of the yen makes importing foreign goods and foreign commerce much more expensive for consumers, but it's a bell ringer for exporters. We already understand that. We've discussed that ad nauseum here. So the yen being at the level that it is now generates, concern with the foreign ministry and with the Bank of Japan. So there's been moves there, to make the long-term interest rates a little bit more lucrative to bring the money in. It's not coming in for a bunch of reasons. The United States economy is going strong, so money goes to where it is more appreciated. But the weak yen does not mean that it's all over. The fiscal posture and expectations and capital flows really will dictate that. And so Japan is not in the doldrums here, but it can tolerate large fiscal packages like we saw with the supplemental budget, even though real growth remains modest because the outward investment and the import needs continue to push capital out of the country, but they're still earning money because of the four pillars that we talked about where Japan makes its money. Most of the money that Japan makes, it's not in building products. It used to be that Japan was building things. It made radios, it made transistor radios and cars and that sort of thing. That created the bubble economy. And Japan has moved away from that. It has shipped off manufacturing to lower cost countries, primarily Vietnam, India, China. So much of the manufacturing, the technology, the IP has gone overseas under Japanese contract. And also during the bubble, the Japanese purchased lots of premier properties. They purchased real estate, they purchased farms. And now a lot of the inflow of the economy is dependent on those returns, the returns on investment that have come in. So as a consequence of that, the population of Japan, and I think most of the people understand this, that you've noticed that, there's a lot of office workers, there's a lot of service industry, there's not a lot of tinkering and making things, there's not a lot of garage economies going on. There's still a nostalgia for takumi, these guys who are in small shops who build things with their hands and they're specialized items. So Japan excels there, even at the big corporate level, making chips and condensers and that sort of thing. But at the mid-level, Japan has kind of relinquished that to other countries. And so it is mostly a service economy. And that's why, like I said once before, the tourism component of it, it's probably the fourth of the four components that support the Japanese economy, but it's no longer automobiles and automobile parts. That part, we've passed that part maybe 10, 15 years ago. So it's, the whole thing with Nissan and Carlos Ghosn, that was kind of the pinnacle of that era where Japan was trying to reassert itself and trying to consolidate, automobile production globally so that Japan really excelled, not just in production here in Japan, but in production in various countries as well. And that kind of all faltered and kind of fell by the wayside. And so we're dealing with a different kind of complexity. So you might remember last week we were talking about Japan's role, Japan's position among the G20 and GDP and where it stands. It probably is number 4 right now. It's the United States, it's China. I think India took over Japan just within the last month. So Japan used to be really celebrating the fact that it was number 2 in GDP. GDP only tells part of the story. It's actually kind of a false flag of prosperity for the country. Yes, Japan makes a lot of money on GDP grounds. It surpasses many of its neighbors, but GDP is tagged to population numbers and also productivity. We talked about this last week. What I'd like to talk about this week is productivity per individual, per Japanese person, and that has continued to slip. And it's a top-tier economy, Japan is, in the aggregate, but the per-person productivity, what people actually buy and how productive their work is per hour, has been softer for some time. So if you just take a look at what happened with South Korea. South Korea, the population of South Korea is about a third of what it is in Japan, yet their productivity per person has increased steadily for the last 20 years, whereas Japan's, it's grown up into the end of the last century and into the 2000s, but it began to plateau off around the 2001 time frame, whereas Korea has continued to move up. So this, the productivity, the tools that are assigned to individuals, South Korea continues to invest in that. Japan is somewhat at a standstill. You'll notice that there's not a whole lot of digitization, this digital transformation. It's almost as if Japan is kicking and screaming, being pulled into that. It is a difficult transition to make. Some countries do it better, and it's quizzical. The Japanese personality, I guess, you would think that they would embrace it a little bit more robustly, but it appears that the South Koreans are more robust in doing that, and it shows up in per person productivity. The Japanese have kind of flatlined out, and that's why AI is being seen as maybe the savior for the economy. The Japanese population, they're not going to be popping out many more babies, and even if they were successful at that, you're not going to see a return on that for 25 or 30 years until the babies who are born now reach a productive age, get a little bit of skill in them, and can manage that. So that's not really going to happen. The Japanese government understands that, and that's why this investment, and if you looked at the supplemental budget, a lot of it is going into AI and chips, AI chips, condensers, and high-end equipment that Japan can use internally, but also export. So Korea provides a bit of a comparison for us, and it's not really nationalism. It is just, I think it's just the system that Japan has been pursuing and the system that South Korea has been pursuing. A lot of countries are watching that. Japan's population is flatlining, it's declining, in fact, and so the participation, the number of foreigners coming in, it has created a little bit of a rub. South Korea is a little bit better at that. In fact, South Koreans are better at traveling internationally than the Japanese are, just traditionally and historically. And they do get a lot of foreigners coming in, but everybody is watching what's going on in Italy and Greece and Spain and in the EU, in fact, in the United States, and thinking, we need to tap that down. The United States is going through a very difficult period now in trying to come up with a strategy to extract those who came in during the Biden administration and earlier, the undocumented foreigners. Japan doesn't want to have that, and the prime minister has made a pronouncement, and her minister for foreign affairs has said there's not going to be any illegal immigration in Japan. I mean, it's an island country. I mean, look at Carlos Ghosn, what difficulty he had in getting out. I mean, getting out and getting into this country is extremely difficult. So I don't think that there's much of a problem there. I think what's happening is that the Japanese are saying the Chinese are really coming in strong. They're coming in, they're purchasing land, they're buying companies. Money needs a place to go. China, there are many, many more millionaires in China than there are, I think, even in the population of Tokyo proper, the 23 wards of Tokyo. I think there are as many millionaires in China as there are people in those 23 wards. So they have money, but they need a place to go, and the Chinese government watches that and manages that. But there is a lot of investment going on, for example, in Okinawa, throughout Tokyo, in the Kanto region, in Kansai. And I think this tapping down by the prime minister is, overall, she talks about foreigners, but I think the quiet message is, the Chinese are really making inroads, and we need to tap that down. And I think a lot of people are reading that, even the Japanese are reading that as it's okay to dislike foreigners. It's okay to be suspicious of foreigners. I don't think that's the real theme here. As January opens, the Minister for Foreign Individuals, the minister that was appointed by the new prime minister to deal with that, has hearings in the beginning of January. So we're supposed to be hearing a kind of a blueprint or guidelines on what the new rules will be on treating immigrants and foreigners who are in Japan. And part of that is the business visa that we have discussed earlier. But it's just, there's so much that's in flux now. we can speculate a little bit right now, but really the beef and the bones will come once the Diet comes into session. So I'd like to wrap up. One other thing I'd like to close with is, formerly the emperor's birthday was a national holiday, and the emperor abdicated. His birthday was January 23rd, December 23rd. That was a national holiday. And now the current emperor's birthday is February 23rd. So we go from Culture Day, which is a 3-day holiday this next weekend, to the opening of the Diet. And then the Diet opens towards the end of January, January 23rd. And then just 1 month later, there is yet another holiday. So holidays are interspersed purposefully throughout Japan. There are 16 of them, and I think 11 of them are 3-day holidays. Anyway, it's just a tidbit. I'm always looking on those, the way they package the 3-day holidays, so that people actually, if it's a holiday in the middle of the week, people generally just stay at home. They don't do anything. But when they package it that way, people are more likely to spend money, to go out, to do something as a family. So it's a kind of a trigger for the economy. With that, I know it's a lot of scattered information. I hope it's useful to you. I hope it brings into clarity some of the things that have been curious for you. But that's why we have the Q&A period, so that we can, be quizzical. We can examine some of the things, some of the points that I brought up. You can input some of your information and, point out where I'm wrong or where I am off base, and we all learn in the process. So thank you very much once again for tuning in. I look forward to doing this every week in 2026 with you. So please put it on your calendar and continue to join us. Back to you, Maya.
Thank you. That's good to hear that you're looking forward for another year of Sunday morning briefings. Okay, thank you for saying that, and I know that you mean it indeed. Thank you.
Yes, I do.
And to everybody who stayed with us or joined us later, Happy New Year once again, and hopefully it will be a good year. Some of you have already commented that it has started with really, let's say, interesting events, and it's going to be a challenging year.
Yeah.
In geopolitical and political sense of the word. I believe you are very right about this. So before we move to the Q&A session, once again, help us spread the word about these briefings. So if you think that they are informative and may help your colleagues, family members, friends, acquaintances, please let them know and let them or share the links with them, so that we can continue to grow. And also, thank you very much for your help. When, as Timothy said, we don't know everything about so many topics, so we appreciate your help with this special help. A special thanks to Hiroku-san, of course, and also Rick and many others who share details when we need them. We appreciate that and are looking forward to developing further this relationship with you. Again, also...
on that point, Maya, if you don't mind, put yourself in my position. I am broadcasting. I'm talking to a global audience of Japan hands, and there are many people in the audience I can't hold a candle to. So it's very dicey for me to sit here and kind of cobble together the news stories that I perceive as important, and then people, they'll fact check and they'll cross reference, and it's so much fun. I don't get offended. People are usually very good natured about it, but it's a really rich dialogue. And the thing is, Maya, nobody else in the world is doing this. This is the only channel in English where you can talk about Japanese politics on a regular basis. And so I really appreciate it. And, bring it on,
Indeed. And I can also say, Timothy, that you are a very brave person. So congratulations.
I deal with you every week.
Oh, you do. I know that. Yes, it takes a special kind of bravery. Yes,
it does.
Okay. So, and also, I believe that you remember we mentioned that this year we are starting to hold movie night.
Yes.
once a month, and this month we are planning for January 20th, which is a Tuesday. We're going to give you more information, more details about this as we move forward and get closer to the date. About the type of movie, we're still thinking about some details because we want to make it enjoyable and not really binding, if I can say, for
Yeah.
anybody. So please stay with us and think about it. Put that or save the date actually. Put it on your calendar so that if you are in Tokyo, we can go and watch a movie together. And
Can
yes,
I add just a little bit of Tabasco on that, Maya?
absolutely yes.
So we don't do a breakfast briefing. If you want a breakfast briefing, that's Dan Harada. Join him once a month at the Capital Tokyo Hotel. It costs Ichimaen, and you get a great briefing on what's going on in diet dynamics. It's a great insight into what's going on. That's not what we do. We do a weekly briefing, catching you up. I don't invite people out onto the boat because it would sink. But but we do want an
Okay.
opportunity where people we can interact with people. There's so few opportunities to do that, and the lingering effects of COVID, they still are with us. People are afraid to go out, but who doesn't like movies? So we thought maybe this is an idea, low low entry fee, no obligation. Show up if you want to. Maybe if it's a great movie, we've all learned something, but we get to see each other, say hello on a regular basis once a month towards the beginning of the month so it doesn't impinge on other important usually Wednesday, Thursday, Friday are robust in the business community. So
Yeah.
anyway, it's our shot. We'll experiment with it, and if it resonates, then we'll just continue it and watch movies as an output.
Yes, and just like with this show, we will appreciate your feedback, of course, and maybe some ideas about what will make you feel more comfortable watching movies together or what might be better, and so
Yeah.
on. So, thank you very much indeed in advance for this. And now let's move to the Q&A. Well, we've got quite a few questions. Before that, Rick, thank you so very much for the compliment. I appreciate it. Please say hello to your mom. I hope that she's fine and also enjoying you being there because I'm sure that as a mother, she wants her children to be close to her.
Ricky.
Rick, yes. So thank you very much indeed. Okay, so now, wow, we've got a lot of questions. So I'm starting with the ones that came very first this morning, and they came from Greg and Rick as well. So.
Good.
Yes, the first one here is, do you think, oh, this is not really related to Japan, but I think you mentioned, Timothy, that it will have some repercussions, to events happening in this region. So I'll just feed it to you. Do you think that the single-handed action taken against Venezuela will embolden Putin and Xi for further actions in Ukraine and Taiwan?
No, I don't think so. It might. I think what it is designed to do is to scare them and to tell them FAFO. Don't don't even think about it. So President Biden, if you remember him, he woke up once and he said, "Just don't." I mean, that was the end of his comment. Just don't. So that didn't put
Mm.
strike fear into anybody's hearts. And I think the United States was weaker as a result of that. That's not the United States that you see today. And you saw that with Iran, and you see that increasingly with the United States kind of releasing Israel to do their damage as they see fit. So it's a different United States than we've seen in a long time. And I think President Trump he's on a roll and there's no resting. The news cycle is like 10 minutes, and then something else comes up. He's got the Department of War. It used to be the Department of Defense. He's moving aggressively there. Um, Many people would say dictatorially, but I think it's cleanup. He's doing a cleanup in the United States too. Japan, the United States does not want to be like England or Italy or Greece, and remedial action is required. And I think that's what he's doing. And I think I don't think it's going to embolden anybody. I think the reason why it was done the way it was done was to emphasize the point that we have lots of resources. We can bring them all together collectively to produce a what is it? Awe and shock and awe. So don't even think about it. I think that's the real message. If you looked at some of the videos that came out, there was a lot of combination of forces going together, and not only that, they captured the president and his wife before they could escape. So they've got them in custody now. So it's, you don't want to fool with that. The Iranians are finding that now. There's probably going to be a toppling of the government there that is orchestrated by various forces, including the United States. So there's a lot in play.
Right, yes. Okay. And following up with a question from Norikazu Yamaguchi, how is the Japanese government responding to the current situation in Venezuela?
So it's a little bit early to say. I have tried to follow up with Koizumi, the defense minister. It's New Year's, so everybody is kind of off. He is a Kanagawa prefecture. He comes from Kanagawa, so I haven't been able to find out if he's been in town, if he's been going to Matsuri and that sort of thing. More likely, that's what he's been doing, but he's probably been spending a lot of time at the defense agency watching this in real time. This is a big deal, what's going on in Venezuela. Venezuela is an oil exporter. Much of the oil was going to not like-minded countries. It was going to China. It was going to other areas. And in fact, the United States actually commandeered some of these oil tankers and took the oil. So there's a lot going on the oil front there. Yes, Japan, since it imports oil, coal, it imports all of its energy, it could have a dramatic impact here. But I think the bigger issue is offensively. How did the United States do what they did? What tools do they bring to bear? And those tools, what does Japan have of those tools? What access does it have? And can Japan supplement its arsenal so that they can at least project the ability to do something similar should they be attacked or should they be pulled into a controversy? So the reason why China is so mad at Japan is because Japan basically said, if China moves on Taiwan, it's such a threat to Japan that we have to get involved. So China is probably looking and say, you guys get involved? What are you talking about? You don't even have an army, So quit pretending, if we're going to do something, we're going to do it. And why don't you shut up and, it's none of your business. So I think that rhetoric it's beginning to grate. And I think in response to that, the Japanese are bolstering their position. So what's going on in Venezuela is, yes, very carefully watched, and I think lessons will be picked up from it, but I don't have any direct knowledge on that.
Right, thank you for that. And also, another follow-up question from Konkyo Life, somebody with this handle name on YouTube, asks, I know you have a lot to discuss, but after the US military intervention in Venezuela, what will be the impact on Japan and the direction of the Japanese yen?
Yeah, we don't know yet. Markets will open tomorrow. Tomorrow's Monday. And yeah, this time next week, it'll be a 3-day weekend. So obviously I will be out on the water. I'll be reporting from the good ship Grimm's. But Friday's close of the yen, today it's 157.8. We'll take a look at what the yen did over the last week. There'll be a lot of news coming out. Venezuela was just hit on Friday night. So on Saturday, actually. So the Trump Takaichi phone call initiated by President Trump was Friday night, Tokyo time. And then Venezuela happened. And today I'm talking to you on this briefing. So Monday, I think more news will filter out. We'll know a little bit more granularly by Wednesday. But by the time we come back together as a group on next Sunday, I think we can have a more rounded conversation about that. But right now, I think it's a little bit early.
Okay, thank you for that. And Peter Pan 2 on YouTube says Venezuela owes a lot of money to China. It is around 20 billion US dollars. So thank you for this bit of information. And moving on, uh, just give me a second. Okay, so moving on to, yes, the meetings between President Trump and Prime Minister Takaichi and also China's Z. Okay, so the question is again from Peter Pan, and he says, or she says, what are the expectations of the meeting between Trump and Z next May? Is, yes, the question.
Yes, it's a great question, Peter Pan. Thank you very much. So Trump and Z are scheduled to meet, what, in April? Is that right? So,
April, yes. Well, there is also a discussion here. So it probably was scheduled for May, but then April, and probably it still remains to be the date or the time remains to be set.
okay. One of the reasons why Trump called Takaichi on Friday was to invite her to Washington, D.C. So the prime minister actually softly requested to meet with him. It generated a phone call maybe 3 weeks ago, and then a follow up call on Friday, including an invitation to go to Washington, D.C. So this will be a state visit. It'll be a big deal. It will probably be the diet will pass the budget on April 1st, April, May, June. I think it's an May, June timeframe when that invitation was extended. It'll be worked out just as the Trump Z meeting will be worked out. I don't know much details about Trump and Z. I think it's Trump's option to go to China, which is a big deal. I don't know if Z would be coming to the United States, but given the dynamics that are going on now, I can understand why the date is not quite yet set. There's a lot going on in our region around Taiwan and the joint exercises between Russian bombers and the Chinese bombers. So it's difficult to say, but clearly Trump doesn't want to get so pincered by China where they're yelling at each other. He has said publicly, Z, oh yeah, we're good friends. We talk all the time. We're good buddies. A lot of that is just promotional material, but he doesn't want to get into any kind of conflict with China. He wants to continue trade operations. He just wants, he was somewhat successful. No more fentanyl coming into the United States. So I think they did something about that, either through Mexico or through Canada. Most of it was coming through Canada, from what I understand, strangely enough. But they've cut down on that, and he wants to keep the trade flow going because, without China, I mean, we've been weaning off that tit for 30 years, not just in the United States, but Japan too. The products that are being sold at Walmart and at Costco and all of these products that we use, household items and little trinkets and toys, that's all coming out of China. So China is developing this huge budget from trade flows, but other countries are relinquishing manufacturing and that kind of production to China. So it's the United States is trying to bring manufacturing back in, but that's a long, slow slog. Training people to once again love tools, to love tinkering, to have stuff in their garage and to work on things. That tradition, I mean, it's died in Japan many, many years ago, but in the United States, it's a little bit more robust. There are a lot of people that live outdoors, they hunt, they fish, they fix cars. That part of the culture is still, there's a good component of that there. So there is hope in that, but it is a long, slow slog. Bringing kids up so that they want to be a mechanic or they want to work with their hands. Most people, and you've seen it in Japan, most people want to work in an office. They want to, shuffle paper. They want to rise up the corporate ladder. It's just the dynamic has changed so drastically over the last 40 years. I can't say 30 years because 30 years ago we were in the bubble. But it used to be Japan excelled at that sort of thing, and you'd never see things being thrown out. They would restore, replenish, and there are so many. For example, cars. I'm into cars today. By the way, is the Rolls-Royce and Bentley owners display at the Akalenga. So they've occupied the promenade there. So there'll be about 60 cars. But there are lots of car clubs here where people restore and cherish these old machines. So that continues on. But I think it's such a small, narrow part. There are a lot of otaku in Japan. They love to focus on specific things, but it's not kind of replicated in industry. And I think what President Trump wants to do is he wants to bring that back in. He wants to bring manufacturing back in. He's allowing countries to bring their manufacturing plants into the United States and giving them tax benefits, because if you don't do that, then we're just going to tariff you. But
Yeah.
then comes the issue of who's going to work in those factories. Who are the people? Are the Americans going to do that? And you have to scratch your head and wonder about that.
Yeah, I think that, well, those are incentives rather in the United States, but I can see that the Japanese government is basically working in this direction as well. And they're trying to, let's say, revive the shipbuilding, bring it back to Japan. They want the Japanese ships to be built here in the country. They also want semiconductor factories to be brought here and, well, made successful in Japan as well. But I think that, again, it's a little bit different from maybe 30 or 40 years ago, because this time the Japanese government is trying to bring manufacturing that has high added value,
Yeah,
right? So it's not the general manufacturing that was strong
that's right.
here until the crash of the bubble economy, I believe. So there is this trend, but it's slightly different from what it was before.
Yeah,
And yes, and yeah, we have Peter Pan. I don't know what you mean by saying this. That 40 years ago, Japan was arrogant because of its economic growth.
yeah,
Maybe, yeah, I guess that it was seen as arrogant indeed,
sure.
especially by countries in Southeast Asia and maybe also other parts of Asia as well. Also, Manabe-san says that the oil price will be important factor for Japan because, Timothy, as you mentioned earlier in the briefing, Japan imports most of its energy resources. So it is going to have some impact in the economy if the prices go up. And we don't know what will happen, as you mentioned, but we'll see. We'll continue watching this. And also, I have a question to you, basically, Timothy, because going back to domestic politics, right? So you mentioned that currently there is this once again very interesting dynamic between the LDP, Ishin, and the Democratic Party for the People, and Komeito is once again circling around. But at the same time, the LDP has said that they are going to field their own candidates in 20 constituencies, right? So that they do not have to rely on any other party like they did with Komeito, for example, right? So do you think that LDP can do that? And how successful do you expect them to be? Because it's quite difficult, isn't it? Of course, we know that Prime Minister Takaichi's ratings are very high. At the moment, they'll probably continue to be so for a while. But is this really a successful strategy for the party? Because we know that the party wants majority that will allow it to take decisions well and be really, let's say, the majority in the not rely on other parties in the
Right.
parliament. So what are your thoughts on this? Is this a successful strategy
So
or
it's actually a lot more dynamic than what you've suggested with Ishin and the LDP. Ishin has actually said in those districts where we competed against the LDP for a position, for a seat, maybe we won and maybe we lost. Now that we have this alliance, we are not going to relinquish that. We're not going to divide up. Look, you won here and we won over here. So why don't you make sure that we'll give you this one? We won't run a candidate, but over here, please don't run. There's not going to be any of that. And that's what the Komeito did for 26 years. They don't have enough candidates to run in a certain district. So they let the LDP run a candidate there, and then they tell their members, we don't have a candidate, but vote for the LDP. And they would. They would by the thousands. They would do what Komeito asked them to do as voters. Even though it's not a Komeito person, it's an LDP person, hold your nose and vote for that person, because someplace else, somewhere in the country that doesn't impact you, we're going to get a benefit there. So although you don't get a benefit, we as an organization do, so please do it. And they do that. Komeito has a very loyal following. Ishin is a different ball of wax, and Ishin has said, in those areas where we contest you for diet seats, we're going to still do it. We're going to still try and raise the level up. You're going to agree with us to reduce by 50 seats or by 45 seats the seats in the diet, but that doesn't actually take hold in the next election. So they still have to fight. And if the LDP wants to maintain a majority, it needs to be nice and kissy face with Ishin and also with the Democratic Party for the People. The Democratic Party for the People has not said one thing about that yet, but the Ishin has. So it's not that the LDP has said kind of aggressively, in those areas we're going to continue to run a candidate, and for Komeito, they've let us. We're still going to run there. It's not at that texture. It's much more important. Ishin has actually come out and said, we're kind of nice to each other, but it's not a formal alliance. So we're going to still contest those seats for you. We're not even close to an election. So the calculation and that kind of verbiage, I don't know if it's very helpful. It just tells you that there's tension between the LDP and Ishin, and Mr. Tamaki is watching from the difference and bringing a bouquet of flowers and saying, "Hi, I'm here too." So this dynamic is really beginning to change and morph, and it's something to watch.
Right, thank you for this. And then we've got a question from Hiroaki. Hiroaki, thank you very much for being here today again. And he says, what do you think about lower approval rates of the LDP instead of the high rate of Ms. Takaichi? So I'm not sure I understand the question very well.
Who's
Probably
this from?
from Hiroaki.
Yes. You always have to be careful with Hiroaki, because he already knows 3 levels back what the answer is going to be. He's just, I
Yeah.
don't know, he's just toying with me. Okay, so yes, the prime minister is popular for a lot of reasons. Well, number one, half the population is going to like her because they're female. So they admire somebody that was able to go through the arduous, torturous route of going into politics and beating these guys and becoming prime minister. I mean, for everybody in the audience too, we never expected that. A female, the Japanese, they would never allow the LDP. Give me a break. They're going to have a female. Who would they choose from? Look at the 8 potential candidates. Gosh, no, it's not going to work. So it is rather astounding that she was able to be successful there. So you've got to give her a little bit of that. And I think even for the men too, it's a breath of fresh air that she is making pronouncements. She's speaking from the podium. She's speaking with strength and resolve. It's unlike what you would expect from a female compared to the guys, and the guys aren't performing as you would expect them to do for a long time. You've got a couple of politicians that are just really mealy mouth, and they're just reading the documents that are fed to them by whatever bureaucracy is behind the whatever policy point that they're making. This is really something different. So that's the prime minister. So her popularity is high. Who she chose to be in her cabinet, that's where the kind of breakage comes. I don't know why you selected Hagiuda. Hagiuda was one of the number 1 guys that put money in his pocket. He was in Seiwakai. He was one of the guys. In fact, he took so much money that they didn't kick him out, but they told him, take a breather. For 1 year, you can't run for office. You can't run for a policy post, you can't have a chairmanship, you can't have a LDP seat. So he went through that year. They had the election, and he won big. He won, in Tokyo. He's a Tokyo politician, one of the Tokyo seats, and he's got one of the most powerful seats. So people are saying, you say you want the LDP to be clean, and yet you pick him. You've got a couple of other guys who look like a little bit sleazy. What's going on with Hayashi? He was the former foreign minister, then the chief cabinet secretary. He's minister of communications now, and the report is he's been taking some money from political support groups. And then you've got, the fellow from Ishin, the co-leader, Mr. Fujita, who has for several years, his diet secretary has been the CEO of a printing company that handles all of the printing for Ishin no Kai members. And how do you do that? He's getting a salary as a diet secretary, and he's the CEO of this company. What's going on with that? So they're saying, look, if you're serious about running a clean government and flipping this over and the LDP going on a new leaf, then put your money where your mouth is, and why are you selecting these people? And that's where the distaste comes from. And I think it's natural, but politics being as it is, she's prime minister because of these guys, because of the kind of fabric that was cut and the deals that were made and the very delicate alliance. So you'll remember that former prime minister, former secretary of finance, current leader of the Aso faction, Mr. Aso, stormed into the prime minister's residence because he was upset with what she was doing and how she was calling the shots and not including him. It's not a presidency, it's a prime ministership. So a president has much more power, but a prime minister reports to a cabinet and also reports to the diet. So they can be called down. A president can. A president has a term of years, but the prime minister can be called down for, slush funds, for inappropriate actions, for maybe selecting people in her cabinet who shouldn't have been selected, and it's your fault. So I think that's where that dynamic is going. Sorry for the long-winded explanation.
No, thank you very much. And there is clarification here from Peter Pan about Japan being arrogant in the 80s. So Peter writes, in the 1980s, the USA was asking Japan to import telecommunication equipment. The president of NTT, Mr. Akikusa, the president at the time, said we can only import mops and buckets from the USA. So I do need to look into this, because I think that it's really dangerous to talk about or to comment, such remarks taken out of context. So, but yes, probably there was some arrogance there, because Japan was really working, and they were developing technology back then, and they were a leader in many of the technological fields. So yeah, Timothy, I don't know what your thoughts are on this, but
no,
I think it's dangerous, yes, to comment out of context.
Yeah, I understand the arrogance comment, because out of character, suddenly Japan was going to the United States and buying these premier properties. And people are saying, what the hell, but they had money, and we will pay above market. We want Rockefeller Center. You want Rockefeller Center? Okay, it's going to cost you an arm and a leg. Here's the arm, here's the leg, give it to us. So some people would interpret that as arrogance. They'd say, you're not supposed to act like that. You're supposed to be Japan. You're supposed to act this way. You're supposed to be a little bit demure. You're the little brother. We've helped you for so many years, and you're supposed to kowtow, and you're coming in and you're buying our flagship properties. Where the hell did you get this money? So I think that's the arrogance. And then the Plaza Accord, and then the yen was tapped down, and then Japan went into this spiral that we're still experiencing today. But comparatively, yeah, I think most Americans who feel like they're on top of the world and everybody should respect and admire what they do, for Japan to come in that heavy and purchase those properties. And one of the reasons we're talking about the 4 pillars that support the Japanese economy, what they did during that period of time, the revenue that is being generated as a return on that investment, supports the economy. So they don't have to rely so much on making things. So it's a huge dynamic. It takes 30 or 40 years to build, but that's the outcome that we have now.
Right. Just a little bit of, let's say, background there. That, well, in the beginning, after the Second World War, Japan was hungry for technology. Japan didn't have really technologies that could help the industrial development of the country, and the government realized that. So Kasumi Gaseki has been very instrumental in creating policies that allowed the businesses here in Japan and corporations to import policies from the United States at that time, and also a few other countries. Many American companies, they got burned in the process because of those policies, and that happened during the 70s and maybe the early 80s. Until those American and other foreign companies, they realized that they basically had to lobby the Japanese government to ease the policies and regulations here. Many of them did. A lot of the lobbying happened on governmental level between the state, well, at the state level, of course. And eventually, many of those regulations, they were eased, and so we saw the entrance of American companies into the Japanese market without them having to enter the market with a Japanese partner. So they didn't have to sell the technology to Japanese companies, and they didn't have to share the technology with Japanese companies. And companies like this, we can see, of course, nowadays, for example, Google and Intel and so on and so on. So this is just a little bit of background for people who are not aware with what the general trends of that time. Of course, there is so much more history there, but I'm going to refrain from sharing all the details there. Yes, and it seems that we have gone through all the questions. And Peter Pan, once again, thank you so very much for this, and please forgive me for
You're
saying
so
that.
arrogant.
No. But I just want to say that, yes, probably there was some arrogance indeed. But
Yeah.
yes, we don't know exactly. I personally don't know the context of that, that event. So please forgive me for being hesitant, to comment on this. And of course, to everybody who stayed with us, once again, thank you so very much for this. And we've got one more comment or question here from Eat Carpet, somebody on YouTube, who says, why are Japanese economic policymakers really passive and not risk-taking compared to the past? This is a great question. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
It looks like we cannot finish that easily, Timothy.
Well, I think, they're standing on on a knife's edge. They are so much in debt as a nation. Their debt to GDP ratio is astronomical. Yet the prime minister decides to spend tremendously in this supplemental budget. So they already know, the policymakers, the financial analysts are already saying, well, I hope you're right, because if you're wrong, we jump further into debt. We're 125% in the hole already. Maybe after your administration, Ms. Takaichi, we're going to be 127% in the hole if your gamble doesn't work. So we just don't know. People have tried it in the past. They've said, let's spend money on building roads and bridges. And that money that will filter out, you buy lots of concrete, you buy lots of steel, it filters out to the general population, this trickle down. I think they've done analysis that shows that trickle down doesn't happen. The people who make the money, they hoard the money, they keep the money, they're fearful for a rainy day, and that's what the policymakers are now. They're fearful for a rainy day. They're worried that the gamble's not going to click. And also, even if it does click, look at this neighborhood that we're in. Is Taiwan going to move? And they're having these exercises, and now we have to buy more armaments, and the United States is kind of backing out, and we have to supplement it. We have to pay not 1% of our GDP, but 2%. And now it's more like 2.5%, and they're asking for more. And how do we accommodate all of that? So I think that is, if you put yourself in their shoes, that is very much a everyday fear that they have, that if it doesn't work, if it doesn't click, what's going to happen? What's going to happen to the yen? What's going to happen to our situation, our position in the world globally? Are we going to be a global leader? Are we going to be a peacemaker? Are we going to be able to incorporate the island nations in the Pacific so that we have this bulwark against, not against China, but just to show China it's not a good idea for you to move in the way that we think you might move. So let's kind of back off. And this inflection point that I think we're coming close to, we haven't passed yet. Once we pass that, then maybe the economies can be a little bit more risk-taking, maybe with the freedom of thought, that there's not going to be a war that we have to prepare for. We have to stow away weapons. We have to, preserve our food self-sufficiency and that sort of thing. When that's released, then people can be a little bit more expansive.
Right. And since you mentioned, I think that, sorry, a couple of points here are coming together right now, because Hiroaki mentioned was Abenomics an aggressive policy? And I wanted to say that, well, while Mr. Abe was in office, there was a lot of controversy, there was a lot of criticism, but we have to give him one thing, that he had a vision. And he had a vision about this country, and he had a vision about the region. And he also had this, once again, I repeat myself, but this enormous task to get the machine, Kasumi Gaseki and Nagatacho, to work together and start moving actually. And it's not easy, because the established systems, the embedded people and politicians and bureaucrats and everything, it was difficult to get them, to start moving. But we see some of the results now, and I believe that Japan needs another person like him, maybe not as controversial as him, but another person who has a vision for the country and for the region as well. So
I don't think he was controversial. He didn't have that kind of personality. Some of the policies that he promoted was a little bit heavy-handed, especially with the press,
right.
and with dissent. But although he was the longest-serving prime minister in post-war history, he also met with Putin personally more than 24 times.
Yeah.
So that's pretty significant. And yes, he did have a vision. He did have a plan. He seemed a little bit awkward about it. I mean, he did some things good. He did some things not so great. But to me, he was a bit of an awkward prime minister. On television, he looked well. He looked prepared. He looked very presentable. But I think on the foreign stage, he was a little bit awkward. But it turns out that he was a great prime minister. And like you said, we need to have somebody to fill that vacuum.
Right. Okay. And one more question from Peter Pan. Is the Rapidus project a risk for Japan?
I don't know if it's a risk. It's in Hokkaido. The riskier one is in Kyushu, in Kumamoto, right? That's TSPS, the huge chip maker from Taiwan. That one's a little bit more risky. It's closer to Taiwan. The idea is to share your risks. TSPS is in Taiwan. That's their headquarters. They do a massive business. They produce almost 95% of all of the high-end chips the world consumes. And they're building a factory in Kumamoto. They're building a factory in Arizona, I think, to kind of spread that risk. Rapidus is a different ball game. China and Russia. Russia is occupying the 4 northern territories. It is still blockading that from Japanese fishing vessels and cargo ships passing through there. But the likelihood of Russia moving aggressively on Hokkaido and therefore threatening Rapidus is much smaller than the other way around on the southern side of the equation. Rapidus is going to really start producing huge wealth and innovation in Japan It's in Hokkaido. A lot of money is going in. More money went in with the supplemental budget. So you can expect good things coming out of Hokkaido. I think they go on stream in about 5 years. So there's still a little bit more of a lead time there.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much for this. And well, thank you for Bobbins the Third. We've got a comment that this is a very popular.
Bobbins the Third.
Yes, I love this handle name too. Okay, very popular stream today. New Year's is always Genki, very much so indeed. And well, before I get okay, risk it. Okay, yes. So before we close down once again this briefing, please remember that we'll be here next Sunday at 8:20. Timothy is planning to report from his beautiful boat on that day. And thank you for staying with us as well. Remember, please put January 20th on your calendar, or well, because we're planning to have a movie night, and if you are in Tokyo, we would love to have you watch a movie with us. Please stay tuned for more details as we get closer to the date. And again, a happy new year to everybody. Yes, Timothy, go on.
So I just want to mention one more time, we've talked about Dan Harada and Dan Harada's monthly briefing. That occurs this next Thursday. If you're interested in going, it's early in the morning. You need to be there and seated at around 7:30 in the morning. Eat your breakfast, and Dan goes on stage at 8, and it's a great briefing. It goes for an hour with Q&A. Go ahead and write to Dan. I think his email is haradadan@gmail.com. And you'll meet a lot of other Japan hands, a lot of guys who have been significantly participating in the government, business, political arena for many years. I've been going to Dan Harada's briefings for 25 years. Almost every month I've been there. So you'll see a lot of the same people. And if this is part of the thing that gets you going, it's part of your job, it's what you should be doing. In addition to, tuning in with us every Sunday, maybe include the Dan Harada briefing on the first Thursday of every month.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much for this. And we wish you, well, great Sunday and also a successful year ahead, a healthy and a peaceful year ahead. I think that's the peaceful wish is probably the most important one at this point of time. All right. See you next Sunday. And well, thanks again.
Thank you, Maya. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.